heavy door and plunged into the wine cellar cut into the stone beneath the vineyard. She hurried past the racks of upturned bottles maturing under the 24-volt lights. This young wine, not yet champagne, was her family's legacy, their future. The bottles at the back of the cellar represented their past. Gabrielle had personally selected the most valuable blends from the last 2 decades. She had also chosen from the previous century, most notably the single vintage 1867 and the infamous 1811, rumored to be of remarkable quality because a comet had crossed over Champagne that year. Finally, and not without much internal debate, she'd added 500 bottles of the celebrated 1928. When she'd first come up with her plan, she'd considered confiding in her grandmother, and perhaps in that moment she would have, if the rain hadn't started up again and pulled her attention to the vines. Now she was glad for the interruption. What her grandmother didn't know, she couldn't worry over. Gabrielle alone would carry this secret, this burden. 20,000 bottles were a mere drop in their stock, but enough to start over if the worst happened and the Nazis... She did not let her mind finish the thought. She went to work instead, constructing one horizontal row of stone at a time, bottom to top. Last week, she had instructed her vineyard manager to place the stones in this part of the cellar. He'd given her no argument. His loyalty had encouraged her to confess her intent, but he'd stopped her, hand on her arm, and said, "What is left unspoken can never be repeated." Pierre was not wrong, but Gabrielle could have used his help tonight. Her unschooled methods proved full of error and wasted precious time. Beads of sweat trickled into her eyes. She wiped at her face with her sleeve, hardly noticing how the dirt coated her hands and dug under her cracked fingernails. Her muscles cried out from fatigue. 1 hour turned into 2, 2 into 3. Then she stepped back, and her stomach swooped from satisfaction to despair in an instant. Her construction was faulty at best. Someone will notice the wall, only if she let them in this part of the cellar. She kept building until one gruesome task remained. Teeth gritted, she retrieved the jar she'd left hidden in a nearby wine barrel. Dozens of spiders crawled over their fellow prisoners, each attempt at escape a miserable failure. Gabrielle could not feel sorry for their plight. She hated spiders. Nevertheless, they would serve their purpose. Hands shaking, she released the little devils. They scattered across the wall, invading their new home with focused, frightening precision. The creatures would spin their webs. They would capture their prey, eventually creating an archaic facade over the freshly laid stone. Feeling as old as the Champagne house, Gabrielle exited the cave and stepped into the dark nothingness before dawn. A moment of utter aloneness laid siege on her tired brain. She nearly stumbled under the weight of it, but managed to keep moving toward shelter, toward home. The rain still fell, slow and steady, stippling the puddles at her feet. Back in her room, she tossed her clothing in the basket with the other muddied garments she'd worn in the vineyard the previous day, and the one before that. Promising herself she would take a short rest, a few minutes, nothing more, Gabrielle collapsed atop her bed. She fell into a fitful sleep, dreaming of crumbling walls and giant spiders. The grotesque bodies marched across a blood-red field, their 8 legs becoming 4, then morphing into Nazi swastikas. They circled around her, round and round, spinning until her arms and legs were trapped and she could no longer move, no longer breathe. She woke, gasping for air, her heart battering against her ribs. Only a dream, she told herself, not real. She blinked into the pre-dawn light, again and again. But the terrifying images of spiders remained.